All right, Madam Clerk, welcome everybody to our Emergency and Community Services Committee agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda? Ida?
No, Mr. Chair, there's no changes.
May I then have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Duval, Councillor Jackson, all in favour? That's carried. There's no opposed. I'd like to welcome Ward 5's Councillor Chad Collins. Any declarations of interest? None. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 10th, 2014 meeting? That's moved by Councillor Morrow, seconded by Councillor Marula. All in favour? And that's carried. Members of committee, you have a delegation request. That's 4-1. It's from Matt Jelly, wishing to address committee at our next meeting respecting the city's zero tolerance policy for violence in recreational facilities. If it is the committee's pleasure, may I have a motion to approve this delegation request? It's moved by Councillor Duval and seconded by Councillor Whitehead. All in favour? Any opposed? Seeing none. Members of committee, we have consent items 5.1 through to 5.8. That is before us. Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Whitehead moves, seconded by
6. It's about what's termed right now the older adult plan by Paul Johnson and a team of staff under the acting general manager Vicky Woodcox. I'm not trying to be at all petty about the terminology. And I've had discussions with Paul, and maybe Paul can just give a public response or comment. Look, back in the 90s, if I recall, under former governments at that time at different levels, there was a move on to try to be a little more inclusive by changing the seniors term to older adults. I found anyways that seniors, mostly the ones I deal with, resented that. And seniors are seniors. There's obviously a legal definition in terms of pensions and that when people are seniors. And any senior group, any senior body that have reached that point in their lives are very protective. I have found again, and I deal with hundreds, and I have over the years probably thousands of seniors in my years, both politically and personally, Mr. Chairman, and they're very protective of the terminology seniors, almost like they've earned it when they've reached that point in that phase of their lives. So here we are calling this plan the older adult plan. I just found it confusing. There's references to seniors throughout the background information, but the plan's called older adult plan. And later on today, Mr. Chairman, in report 8.2 later on, you'll see how Hamilton embarked upon a Hamilton seniors strategy. And so if we embarked upon a Hamilton seniors strategy, I would like to see consistent language and not confusing things with calling something now an older adult plan. And so before I offer my suggestion or two, maybe a comment from Paul Johnson, Mr. Chairman, through you. And of course, anything I'm saying would obviously just hopefully be taken under advisement after today.
Through the chair, thanks for that. And certainly our intent isn't to try and broaden the scope of what we were directed by committee and council to do. This is trying to advance the senior strategy. Most communities are using terminology around age-friendly or older adult plans, and so we've been trying to look at other jurisdictions and what they've been doing. But make no mistake, this is to deliver on the senior strategy component of the strategic plan. So what we'll do is we'll continue to ask some questions of groups, including the very key stakeholders, which are the Seniors Advisory Committee and the other Seniors Advisory Committees across the community. Just had a meeting with the Flamborough Seniors Advisory Committee today, and we'll continue to involve them and the Council on Aging in terms of what the right title should be. So just to allay any fears, we're not looking at trying to broaden the scope of this in any way, just trying to find the right terminology that all residents can find helpful for the plan.
Paul, I appreciate that. Thanks for that open-mindedness. Sounds like it's a work in progress. And like I was even penning something like, Mr. Chairman, the Hamilton plan for seniors and our aging population, something like that. Again, the city embarked and sanctioned, endorsed something called the Hamilton Senior Strategy. And quite frankly, psychologically, I'm in my 50s, and I'll be darned if I consider myself an older adult. So it's just something psychological, Mr. Chairman, as well. well. So anyways, so Mr. Chairman, I'll leave the thoughts with Paul. Please also, Paul, engage like the Sackville Hill Senior Center, the Alberton Senior Center, other seniors programs on Ottawa Street, on McNabb at the Wise. And I think you'll find that most seniors I deal with are very protective of that precious term seniors, that they've earned it, proud of it. And I just worry that we blur it a bit and cause a little confusion by just saying a broader term of older adults. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, and also 155 Park, I failed to, in the agenda review, suggest that we dialogue with them. We likely already are, but there's a number of older adults in addition to seniors at 155 Park, and they take a lot of pride and engagement in our community. So no further speaker. Councillor Whitehead. 158.
Provided by the community. I think it was over 48 households. St. Thomas More basically has a state-of-the-art field. They have an artificial turf, state-of-the-art track, and loud, what do you call it, speaker system, and bleachers. And so obviously there are many organizations that have been renting it through a third party. So they've hired a third party to rent the fields. And the issue is that there was, certainly when you buy next to a high school, there's certain expectations on the type of operations to take place there. When you add on, and I know I live in the neighborhood, and not that I'm complaining, but certainly in my backyard, which is quite a distance away, most of these complaints are coming from people immediately next to the field. They have that loudspeaker system blaring. And in fact, I can't hear my own music in my backyard over their music. So clearly, one of the issues is the usage of the speaker system that accommodates them into the 8, 10 o'clock at night that emanates from the park usage. What this does is establish a protocol and working with the community. I believe they're meeting with some of the residents, the third party, to try and address those issues. And of course, the other issue is that after hours, there really isn't any washroom facilities. And unfortunately, there was a number of instances where people were observed urinating in the backyards of homes, which was another concern. If you don't have the proper amenities, then it creates some pressures when people are having their own backyard type barbecues. So this here actually sets at least a discussion and a dialogue. No one, and even these neighbors who I met directly, very reasonable people, they have no expectations to shut down the operations. They see it as a good thing. They're just asking that there's some understanding and protocols put in place to ensure that they, through the summer months, know that they're going to get some quietness to entertain their guests in their backyards, as opposed to having it so booked so heavily that, and I'm telling you it is, that there's no quiet time for them to actually enjoy their backyards. So I'm quite optimistic that what is in front of me here today will address those issues, and certainly I, being in the neighborhood, will be monitoring the success of those discussions. And so thank you to staff.
Monitoring you.
Yep.
And your backyard noise.
Thank you.
Councillor Marula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on 5.2, under the various advisory committee minutes for information, if I could just highlight one issue that did arise at the Veterans Committee, where Councillor Pursuit and I presently sit, and Councillor Morelli sat prior to his death. The issue came up as a result of Councillor Johnson coming forward surrounding vets parking, and the fact that she would like to open up the discussion again to allow all vets to have free parking in the city of Hamilton. As you know, Mr. Chairman, and those around this table, we went through this process many years ago, and Councillor Morelli and Councillor Powers, in their leadership, were able to find a compromise. The compromise which we presently has an age restriction of 60, and in essence was one that we all decided would be a going forward policy, and one that was sage and frugal by nature, but also respected those that served for our country, or served our country. In conclusion, the committee, as a result of Councillor Johnson's comments, reaffirmed their position that they still believe that vets parking should be free. Being a member of that committee, and Councillor Pasuta being a member, we committed to bring that voice forward to committee. The minutes of our last meeting aren't included in this package, and we did direct staff at that time to include the motion for this meeting. I presume the minutes of that particular meeting in meeting, but I just want to
On that? Sure. Councillor Whitehead?
Yeah, I think it's just for clarification. So whether it's a motion or not, it's not that we would implement something, it would be and the implications.
That's correct. So we'll be directing staff to report back, as we did 5-6 years ago, to basically provide a thorough outline of the pros and cons and the costs associated with such an endeavor.
We'll look for that on the next agenda. Councillor Duval, 5-3.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And through you, maybe I could ask to either Jillian or Bob McKnight that this has to do with some unfortunate, under some unfortunate circumstances of what's happened to a facility that was run by a business, and I guess they find themselves in trouble, but to keep it going, in the meantime, they're asking for a $100,000 loan grant. So a grant or a loan?
Julian.
Through the chair, this is in fact a loan. What happened is we do have housing officers who go and do operational reviews of all our nonprofits on an annual basis. And when they did the operational review at McGivney Homes, it became apparent that the nonprofit operator was in trouble. They were having some challenges as far as their property management as well as their finances. So what Bob McKnight did as the manager of social housing is that he assigned East Kiwanis Property Management to take over the property management to ensure that the tenants were getting the service that they should be getting. And from there, she uncovered very quickly that there were problems with their finances, and they were in danger of not being able to pay their mortgage for the month of December. So what we did in that case is our acting general manager, Vicki Woodcox, approved $100,000 being transferred to McGivney Homes while staff had the opportunity to review the finances and get access to the $100,000. So we would say that things are progressing well, and that we do fully expect that that $100,000 is going to be repaid and put back in the Social Housing Reserve Fund.
Okay, and thanks for that, Jillian. So East Kiwanis is now taking it over. Is that correct?
Through the chair, East Kiwanis has actually taken over the property management,
okay.
But they haven't taken over the full operation.
Okay.
They are still a nonprofit home, but Bob McKnight and his staff are actually working with the board of directors to help them get back on track.
Okay, and so when I'm reading that it's a repayable loan back to the city once the project is stabilized, is there any time frame that we're talking about stabilization, or?
I just confirmed with Bob McKnight through the chair, and he said that it would take up to 1 year. So we can certainly report back in 1 year once we've had that opportunity to review their finances and support them through this process.
Great, and I thank you for catching this, for helping out these homeowners, and you know, it's just, like I said, it's unfortunate that it had to go this way, but great job to Bob too for following up and making this happen. Thank you very much. I fully support it.
Okay, Councillor Duval has the chair, and through you, Jillian or Bob. The issue monetarily related directly to the property maintenance. That's where they got into trouble, and so that person or company that ran the property maintenance, where are we going to monitor and deal with them, or is it out of our jurisdiction? And is it something we should keep our eye on? Through you.
Through the chair, this was an arrangement that McGivney Homes had with this particular property management company, but and so that is now out of our jurisdiction, and that East Kiwanis has taken over.
Okay, Thank you. I'll take the chair back. And so we're looking for a motion to approve items 5.4, 5.5, and 5.7, and then receive the balance of the reports. Moved by Councillor McCaddy and seconded by Councillor Duval. All in favor? It is carried. Moving on in the agenda. No delegations. No presentations. Are there any questions for discussions respecting item 8.1? On to discussion items. Councillor McCaddy, and who else was that? Councillor Duval.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank the Housing Division for bringing this report forward. We had, I think, allocated some funding for expanding and getting. Okay, Mr. Chair, there. Yeah. Okay. To get some of the larger units back on stream, 3 bedrooms and larger. Some of the families that do need housing in Hamilton need housing right away, do need the larger family housing. So this is great to see this report coming forward. 3 different housing organizations are going to benefit from these funds. They're outlined here, East Kiwanis, City Housing Hamilton, and Sons of Italy. And Mr. Chair, Bob McKnight and I had the opportunity to meet with Sons of Italy to talk to them about, I guess, a little bit about this, but more about the opportunity for them to make use of the value in some of their existing units so they can build additional housing. And it's I just wanted to take the opportunity to comment on the Sons of Italy organization, which I was less familiar with, obviously, than City Housing Hamilton, being the president of City Housing Hamilton. But they're a fabulous housing organization, of course, long time in our city, nothing new in that sense. But my first opportunity to learn a little bit more in depth about their organization and the kind of work that they do, and just a standout for providing housing and supportive housing. And those of you who host Sons of Italy Housing in your neighborhood no doubt have very good things to say, because they maintain the housing to a really high level. And we'll be working with them through housing, through Bob's work, to assist them in building even more housing and additional features in some of those neighborhoods as well. So a very good news report for us here in Hamilton to get some of the larger units, 3 or more bedrooms, back on stream by making repairs and helping the larger families that are on our waiting list, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thanks.
Councillor Duval.
Thanks, and just echoing the comments of the previous speaker, it's good. The questions I have to Jillian, the amount of houses, when you look at units, they're averaging around $70,000 average to fix these up, which I understand some of them have structural damages. But is there more out there? Is there more of these units?
Through the chair, we did do a call for applications to all our social housing providers, and these were the only applications that we had. So we have to assume, by virtue of the fact that we were offering to cover the cost of getting them repaired, that there aren't any further single scattered units that are vacant out there.
Okay, so these are the ones that you're aware of from Hamilton Housing, okay, and that's the ones they've applied for. That's where I take that answer?
Through the chair, that is correct.
So my question then should be going back to Hamilton Housing for my next one. So I thank you very kindly.
Councillor Marula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on this particular item, I'm just wondering, we're spending a significant amount on upgrading these properties. And I'm sure, as everyone recognizes, particularly in the inner city, we've seen a significant amount of value assessment growth of the value of these particular units. So through you to Jillian, has there been given any serious thought of unloading these properties, utilizing the return of our investment to provide more housing on an individual basis, or increasing the amount of housing rather than in these individual homes? So through you, Mr. Chairman, to Jillian.
Good question.
Through the chair, in fact, all of our social housing providers are looking at their capital and their properties at this point in time. And I think that we are going to see into the future that the social housing providers are starting to consider selling their current properties and leveraging that funding to build further. But in this case, I believe that the social housing providers, given the cost involved in repairing them, it is still a lower expense than actually building new.
Do you, Mr. Chairman, so for instance, as an example, one home worth $300,000 can provide, I believe, more than one unit for housing, but yet you're telling me that that's not the case? So what is the cost of per unit housing then? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
On average, through the investment in affordable housing, we're usually funding at about $150,000 per unit, if that gives you a sense.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chairman, I guess my point is, some of these properties, I think, are more than $150,000 if we were to sell them. So if we were to pool all of those monies, I think the end result would be a surplus or an increase of units as opposed to the status quo. And I guess before, if that's been assessed, do we have the data accordingly of how many units we could provide if, with this pool of money, if we were to unload the assets themselves?
Through the chair, these are three separate social housing providers, and so it's really up to the social housing providers to develop their own capital plans, as City Housing Hamilton is doing. And then what would have to happen is we would have to get the consent of the province for each of them to sell their properties.
So I guess my point is, we could spearhead or facilitate that so that we're in a position where the service providers recognize the benefit, that we recognize the benefit, and then we can have a joint initiative to the province to act accordingly. And I know that through you, Mr. Chairman, Toronto is going through that very exercise because they've seen or they see a benefit in doing so. And I personally believe that there would be a benefit to us as well if collectively we looked at the amount of money that was in value versus what we can provide with that accordingly. So through you, Mr. Chairman, to Gillian.
Through the chair, I absolutely support that approach. And what we're doing right now, and a report will be coming forward to committee very shortly on capital reserve studies, and the fact that a lot of our social housing providers are struggling as far as maintaining their properties, and that I think that an overall city plan as far as disposing of current properties and rebuilding is a very good one.
Okay. So through you, Mr. Chairman, to Gillian, do you require a formal motion of this committee and council, or would direction be fine? What would be the best initiative at this point?
Through the chair, I think that a direction is fine at this point in time.
Okay, and perhaps we can then look at drafting a motion if need be. So at this point, we'll just go with the directive, and I'll speak to you afterwards regarding drafting a motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Whitehead.
A little bit on the same theme, and I think we raised this before, how many units we may have out there that are completely vacant and dire need of love, tender love. The reality is that they're in rough shape, but they're in areas that our homes are being sold for over $300,000. So when you look at a cost-benefit analysis, you might be able, even if you demolish the building and open the lot, you probably raise more dollars by divesting and putting that money back into investing in homes for or repairs for those in need. So the first question I have, and I've asked this before, City Housing made applications here for a number of the houses, and we're going to provide some dollars for it. But this doesn't represent how many homes they have in need. It's just how many they actually made an application to. Because I think I heard an answer that this is meeting their need. Well, it's meeting their need because is there a cap on this particular program? Maybe that's the first question.
Or Bob, it doesn't matter.
Through the chair, as far as a cap, what we are working with is the available funding within our social housing capital reserve. And just to give you a little bit of background information through the chair, what we were doing as far as this initiative goes is we were focusing on those single scattered units that had 3 or more bedrooms. And the reason that we were doing that is because there is a shortage of 3+ bedrooms in the social housing stock. And with newcomers, with large families coming into the city, it was particularly important to increase that type of stock within the social housing stock in general.
Okay, so then is it possible, I'm already hearing that there's probably at least 25 or more houses that meet that criteria. They're not on this list. They're owned by City of Hamilton. They're vacant because of the shape they're in. Is that possible? And if that's possible, then why would that not be part of their application? Was there something limiting them from doing that?
There's no.
Through the chair, I'm struggling to answer that question in that we put out the call for application, and that is what City Housing Hamilton applied for, as well as East Kiwanis and Sons of Italy. I do know that there are certainly other units that require work when a tenant leaves and it has to be fixed up, but at this point in time, we were focusing in on the single scattered units.
So what I'm trying to focus on, and I've said this before, we should be taking care of our own city housing first before we start expanding the program to others. My understanding is that we have a significant amount of units that are currently not being rented out, not generating any revenue, and sitting there and deteriorating. I'm trying to understand from a city housing point of view, when they fill out that application, they didn't put those other homes on here. Is it because they were only allowed to apply for so much out of the envelope? What was the restriction, or was there any restriction in regards to how many units they could have put forward?
Jillian.
Through the chair, there wasn't any restrictions as far as the number of units that they could apply for. So these are the units that, this is the application that they put forward, and they're being approved for all of them. And just through the chair to add to the comment about putting City Housing Hamilton first, we are service manager. Our role in Housing Services Division is to be service manager of all social housing in the city, and there are 47 operators in total. So I just wanted to clarify that that is our responsibility as a service manager for the City of Hamilton.
And to add to that specifically, we turn now to the president of City Housing Hamilton, Brian McCaddy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to this. Certainly there is an equity issue here. The city's housing division is very different than the city's City Housing Hamilton Affordable Housing Corporation, right? And the housing division, the city deals with all the housing corporations across the whole municipality. So they can't certainly say, you know, Sons of Italy, we, you know, appreciate what you do, but the heck with you. City Housing Hamilton's getting all the money. Although we, you know, we might try that, but it wouldn't fly. I know Housing Division would make sure that didn't happen. It needs to be equitable, and these funds come in from the province, so they need to go to housing corporations right across the city, not City Housing Hamilton. So in this case, if I'm not mistaken, I think this money was allocated through a previous Canada-Ontario affordable housing offer that we received, and instead of spending it all on new housing, we said we wanted to fix some existing housing. I'm trying to remember the source of the funds, but it was a council decision to do that. But there's only so much of that money around, using reserve and using the money that came from the province and the feds. So if we had more money, City Housing Hamilton has a longer list, as does likely Sons of Italy, as does Victoria Park and the other housing providers. So it's just a question of how much money's on the table, and this is it. This is all the money we have at the moment to fix up the larger units, the 3+ bedrooms. I just wanted to mention in reference to Councillor Marula's comment that several years ago, City Housing Hamilton did identify 90 singles and semis that we surplused, as indicated could be surplused, and we received the right from the province of Ontario, and it's a ministerial consent through Bob's work to actually sell those to families, and we did that. And we've used those funds to build additional housing throughout the city. And we're right in the process now of doing the exact same thing again, surplusing a number of the singles and semis that we have to realize those funds so we can reinvest in additional housing throughout the city. So I think we're headed down the pathway that Councillor Marula is talking about, and I wouldn't be surprised if other housing providers who have the ability to do that would be doing the same thing. It makes all kinds of sense to do a citywide strategy rather than just city housing doing its own thing, Kiwanis doing its own thing. Just so happens that city housing, we're a much larger housing provider, so we have more singles and semis to work with than the other providers in town. So hopefully that helps a little bit, Mr. Chair.
Councillor, I still have you on the speakers list. Did you want me to maintain that?
Yeah, no, I think this would supplement to some of the questions I was asking. But I'm still trying to understand. I understand the equity and that we have a responsibility, but we also have a legal liability in regards to city housing. Is that not correct? So if something goes wrong, even though we have an independent board with councillors sitting on it, at the end of the day, the legal paperwork will come right back to the city. Would that be the same would that apply the same way with the other providers, or would the city of Hamilton be in a unique situation from a liability and risk perspective?
Jillian?
Through the chair, as service manager for all social housing in the city of Hamilton, we are liable at the end for the operation of all of them. But again, the City Housing Hamilton is a separate corporation, which is indirectly owned by the City of Hamilton.
Okay, so do we have anyone from legal here? Because I'm trying to understand how you can have a direct board, even though it's incorporated, with councillors sitting on it. I've already been advised on the HECVI situation, for example, by legal, that the city ultimately would have the liability because we own the facilities, and it would be a higher risk to the city than a facility that's not owned by the city. So I'm really trying to understand what our liability and risk are when it comes to homes that are in dire need, that are owned by the city, and yet we're not. I'm hearing that the city's not at any greater risk than the other providers, and I've been told by legal that's not the case. So I need to understand: are we not at greater risk if we don't take care of our own units?
Through the chair, given the detail of these questions, I would like to take your questions to legal services and get back to you on that, Councillor Whitehead.
I appreciate it, and where I'm getting the context is we were advised by legal on the HECVI facilities, which were owned by the city, and what the difference is between city-owned facilities and non-city-owned facilities when it comes to liability and risk. They're different. There's no way that they're the same. If you don't own the risk, as if you do. And that is what I need to understand, is what risk are we putting the city in when it comes to city housing if we're not addressing the needs of city housing. Thank you.
Councillor McCaddy, did you still want to be on the list? Councillor Duval.
Yeah, and just because what Councillor Whitehead is saying, a lot of times the housing, when the application is made, and then with Hamilton Housing, they're still outstanding because they're still doing their investigation about how much damage was done to their house. So it could be there to Hamilton Housing, and they've only reported to you what they need done. I'm going to be bringing it up to Hamilton Housing. That's where it belongs, and I'm going to be asking where these other units that we could be using there. And then when that happens, I'm sure it'll be coming back to use. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so anybody else on this item? Anybody else on 8.1? Who has a hankering to move 8.1? Councillor McCaddy, and seconded by Councillor Whitehead. All in favor?
Just a second.
It's okay.
The question I had was something I can ask at the end of the meeting regarding a city housing project that's taking place in my ward. I'll ask that at the program.
I'll set some time at the end for you to do that. Moved by, then seconded by Councillor. Anybody want a second? Councillor McCaddy's 8.1. Councillor Jackson, thank you very much. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. 8.1 carries. Are there any questions or discussions on 8.2? Councillor Jackson.
So, Mr. Chairman, on the background of this report on the Appendix A, it talks about the bed bug eradication, 350 grand with Bob McKnight. So in light of the recent discussion we had at Board of Health, that's coming to council in 2 days for ratification, hopefully. Is this all hopefully part and parcel of that larger citywide strategy that got unanimous support at Board of Health? Mr. Chairman, through you to either Jillian or Bob for a comment, please.
Through the chair, Councillor Jackson, you are correct that $350,000, $150,000 is going to the residential care facilities for bed bug remediation. 150 is for the bed bug strategy and public information educational, and the balance is going to be going to bed bug remediation for low-income vulnerable people in the city of Hamilton.
Whether they're rental and or whether they may own their own homes, provided they meet that income criteria.
Through the chair, that is correct, Councillor Jackson.
Wonderful. Thanks for that reassurance, Jillian. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else 8.2? On 8.2 to move it, Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor McCaddy. All in favor? Any opposed? It carries. Any questions respecting item 8.3? Councillor Marula, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On 8.3, it's related to, I believe, what Councillor Collins may have initiated a few months ago with GIC surrounding the concession stands and the fact that the volunteer groups have an interest in actually facilitating and operating the concession stands at certain venues. In saying that, I'm glad to see that it's finally before us. It was slow getting here, but having said that, I do want to thank staff for their involvement in this, and also Councillor Collins for taking the lead. I spoke with the volunteer group at Parkdale Arena, so they do look forward to seeing this come to fruition. I think it's an innovative way of assisting volunteer groups in raising funds with very little impact on our bottom line. And as a direct result, I strongly support what's before us, and I thank all those that have been involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Along the same lines, I too want to thank staff for bringing this forward. It was presented to us, as you know, a couple of years ago through the service delivery review. It was one of those 100 and some odd options that were on the list. And as you know, prospective partnerships like this, like the one that's in front of us, has the potential to save us a substantial amount of money. And as Councillor Marula noted, it's we're probably looking at as good or better service than what's being provided now at a lower cost. And so those opportunities certainly don't present themselves that often. Preliminary discussions with minor hockey reps hint that there's interest from a number of minor hockey associations as well as some of the skating clubs. And so I'm really happy that that Vicky's included in the first part here, that we're going to consult with those volunteer user groups prior to coming back with a detailed list of those who may be interested on a go-forward basis. So it has the potential to save us a couple of $100,000, I think, if at the end of this pilot we end up downloading or partnering with these organizations to allow them to raise funds for their own associations. And so it really is a partnership in the true sense of the word, and I too want to thank staff for bringing it forward as they have.
And regardless of who's managing our concessions, I'm hopeful that the nachos and cheese will always be available throughout the city. Anybody else? Good work on the file. All in favor? Any opposed? It carries. Thank you. Looking forward to watching this pilot as it plays out. On to notices of motions. Any notices of motion? Councillor Marula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just spoke with Jack Brown about this particular issue. It's something that I've spoken to the McQuestion neighborhood community about, and I'd like to bring forward as a notice of motion. Whereas the city of Hamilton has a significant parcel of land dormant in the McQuestion neighborhood, whereas McQuestion neighborhood is in the process of developing the first urban farm, which conforms to a better public health, community service, and neighborhood strategies to be the best place in Canada to raise a child, promote innovation, engage citizens, and provide diverse economic opportunities. And whereas the obesity issue as it pertains to public health is of concern, I am proposing that we seek out an assessment from staff to develop the first urban fitness trail in that parcel of land that would connect the fitness trail itself to the Red Hill Valley Trail, the Bruce Trail, the rail trail, and basically be an expansion upon our present trail system, which is probably second to no one in North America. And on that point, I look forward to having this motion come forward at our next meeting. Thank you.
It's a great follow-up to my nachos and cheese. I didn't get a mover and a seconder for the concession deal, by the way. So moved by Councillor Marula, seconded by Councillor Whitehead. All in favor? Carried. Thank you for that notice of motion. We'll look forward to debating it at our next Emergency and Community Services Committee agenda. Anybody else with a notice of motion? May I have a motion now then to approve the changes to the outstanding business list outlined in 11.1A and B. That's moved by Councillor Whitehead and seconded by Councillor Morrow. All in favor? Any opposed? And Councillor Whitehead, this might be the appropriate time for you to remark on whatever it was you wanted to remark on.
Thank you. Actually, it was just Mr. Chair, it was a question relative to current development, but it is city housing, providing additional units, which I'm very supportive of in Ward 8. There's been appears to be delays and inconveniences being causing some of the neighborhood, and I've had some complaints. So I'm just trying to get an update on what the status of that particular project is. When do we expect it to be completed, so I can at least relay that information back to the community. I did talk to Councillor McCaddy next to me. He is committed to getting those answers for me, so I'll save staff the trouble. Thank you.
Well, you got the mic on. You want to adjourn this thing?
Pardon?
You want to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Seconded by Councillor McCaddy. All in favor? Any opposed? None. Thank you, Ida. Thank you, staff.